When Victoria Reeves slammed the document on her mahogany desk and uttered those impossible words, "I'll give you my company if you can solve this," Miguel felt his heart stop, his grease-stained janitor's uniform suddenly heavy with the weight of an opportunity that could rescue his daughter's life or destroy what little dignity he had left. Victoria Reeves stood at the polished mahogany desk, her ivory suit a stark contrast against the deep blue walls of her executive office. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the row of gleaming trophies and awards that lined the shelves behind her. Financial charts displayed on sleek monitors showed an upward trajectory, a testament to Apex Innovations' meteoric rise under her leadership. She slid the document across the desk, her manicured finger tapping on the signature line. The gesture was deliberate, confident, brooking no argument. "I need these financial projections verified and the contract signed by end of day," she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority that had become her trademark in the corporate world. "The board meeting is tomorrow morning, and everything must be in order." The executives standing nearby nodded in unison, their expressions a mixture of respect and thinly veiled fear. Victoria had earned her reputation as a brilliant but ruthless CEO, a woman who had clawed her way to the top through sheer intelligence and unwavering determination. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in the company's history and had tripled its value in just 5 years. What no one knew was that Victoria was desperate. Behind the immaculate suit and composed demeanor, a storm was brewing. The latest acquisition, a tech startup with promising AI capabilities, had revealed a mathematical anomaly in their algorithm that threatened to unravel everything. The equations didn't balance, and the implications were catastrophic. If they couldn't solve it before the merger was finalized, Apex would be acquiring a worthless company, and Victoria's carefully constructed empire would begin to crumble. 3 teams of analysts had failed to crack it. 2 consulting firms had given up. Even Victoria, with her double PhD in applied mathematics and economics, was stumped. As if summoned by her thoughts, a knock at the door broke the tense silence. "Not now," she called, irritation edging her voice. The door opened anyway, and Victoria's assistant poked her head in. "I'm sorry, Miss Reeves, but maintenance is here to fix the thermostat. It's been malfunctioning all morning." Before Victoria could object, a man in a blue uniform stepped into the room. He moved with quiet confidence, seemingly oblivious to the power players surrounding him. His cap was pulled low over his eyes, but Victoria caught a glimpse of intelligence in them as they briefly met hers. "This will only take a minute," he said, his voice surprisingly articulate. He moved to the wall panel near the bookshelves, removing a small toolkit from his pocket. Victoria sighed and turned back to her executives. Where were we?" The marketing director cleared his throat. "The projection models for next quarter. The number sequence is wrong," the maintenance man interrupted, his back still to the room as he worked on the thermostat. The room froze in collective shock. No one interrupted Victoria Reeves, and certainly not a maintenance worker. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice was dangerously quiet. The man turned, gesturing toward the papers on her desk. "Oh, your equation. The sequence doesn't work because you're using the wrong progression." He stepped forward and pointed to a specific line on the document. "If you allow for quantum distribution rather than linear progression in your algorithm, the pattern resolves itself." Victoria stared at him, speechless. The executives exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to call security or wait for their boss's reaction. With deliberate slowness, Victoria picked up the document and examined the line he'd indicated. Her mind raced through the calculations, testing his theory against the problems that had stumped her team for weeks. "Everyone out," she said suddenly, her eyes still fixed on the paper. The executives hesitated, confused by the abrupt dismissal. "Out!" she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. As the door closed behind them, Victoria looked up at the maintenance man. "Who are you?" He removed his cap, revealing a face marked by intelligence and quiet dignity. "Miguel Castillo. I maintain your building's electrical and HVAC systems. Do you understand quantum distribution algorithms?" Her tone was skeptical, bordering on accusatory. "I understand mathematics," he replied simply. Mundane numbers speak a universal language. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her analytical mind reassessing everything about the man standing before her. His uniform was worn, but immaculately clean. His hands showed the calluses of physical labor, but moved with precision. This was no ordinary maintenance worker. "Sit down, Mr. Castillo." She gestured to the chair across from her desk, a seat usually reserved for board members and high-profile clients. He sat without fanfare, placing his cap on his knee. Victoria pushed a blank piece of paper across the desk, along with a pen. "Show me." Without hesitation, Miguel began writing, his hand moving confidently across the page. Equations flowed from his pen with elegant simplicity, breaking down the complex problem into its component parts. Victoria watched, fascinated, as he revealed the solution that had eluded her team of experts. "Here," he said finally, pushing the paper back toward her. "Your original approach assumes a static relationship between these variables, but technology markets don't behave linearly. They follow quantum pattern, multiple states existing simultaneously until market adoption collapses them into one reality." Victoria's mind raced as she followed his logic. He was right. The solution was elegant, beautiful in its simplicity once you shifted your perspective. "Where did you learn this?" she asked, unable to hide her curiosity. A shadow passed over Miguel's face. "I was 3 years into a PhD in theoretical physics at MIT when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. I dropped out to care for her and pay the medical bill." He shrugged slightly. "Life happens." Victoria felt something unfamiliar stir within her, respect tinged with regret for a brilliant mind diverted from its natural path. It was a feeling she rarely experienced in the cutthroat world of corporate leadership. "Do you know what this equation represents, Mr. Castillo?" she asked, tapping the paper between them. "The foundation of your company's newest acquisition, a predictive AI model that's supposed to revolutionize market forecasting. But the core algorithm has a flaw that makes it unstable beyond short-term predictions." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And how would you know that?" A small smile crossed his face. "I read the research papers published by the startup's founders. The maintenance room gets excellent Wi-Fi, and night shifts are long." Victoria leaned back in her chair, a decision crystallizing in her mind. It was impulsive, perhaps reckless, but something told her it was right. This man had solved in minutes what her highly paid teams couldn't crack in weeks. "Mr. Castillo, I have a proposition for you," she said, her voice taking on the tone she used for high-stakes negotiations. "I'll give you my company if you can solve one more problem for me." Miguel raised an eyebrow, his expression a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. "Your entire company?" The corners of Victoria's mouth turned up in the barest hint of a smile. "A significant stake in it, at least. Enough to change your life forever." She opened her desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "This contains the most critical challenge facing Apex right now, something no one else has been able to solve. If you can crack it, you'll earn not just my gratitude, but a seat at the table." She held out the envelope, a challenge and an opportunity hanging in the air between them. Miguel looked at her steadily, then at the envelope. In the silence of the executive office, with financial charts glowing on the walls and the city sprawling below them, a janitor and a CEO faced each other across an unexpected threshold of possibility. He reached for the envelope. "I'll need a pencil." The envelope felt unnaturally heavy in Miguel's hand. He opened it carefully, as if defusing a bomb, and pulled out several pages of complex financial projections, technical specifications, and a single-page brief outlining the challenge. Victoria watched him intently, studying his expressions as he absorbed the information. Most people would be overwhelmed by the complexity, but Miguel's face remained calm, his eyes scanning methodically across each page. Outside the glass walls of her office, Victoria could see her executive team huddled in anxious conversation. They shot furtive glances toward her office, clearly bewildered by the scene unfolding before them. Their formidable CEO locked in intense discussion with a maintenance worker. "Let them wonder," Victoria thought. She'd built Apex Innovations from a struggling mid-tier company into a market leader by making unconventional decisions. This might be her most unconventional yet, but her instincts rarely led her astray. "This is about the Quantum Meridian project," Miguel said finally, looking up from the papers. "Your R&D team has hit a fundamental barrier." Victoria leaned forward. "You're familiar with it. Only through publicly available information. Your company has been developing a predictive market analysis system using quantum computing principles. It's revolutionary in theory, but," he tapped the papers, "you've encountered a scaling problem." Victoria couldn't hide her surprise. The Quantum Meridian was Apex's most closely guarded project, their potential game changer in the market. That Miguel had pieced together so much from publicly available scraps was impressive. "The problem is multi-dimensional," she confirmed. The algorithm performs brilliantly in controlled tests, but destabilizes when we introduce real-world variables. We need a solution that maintains quantum coherence across diverse datasets." Miguel nodded, his mind already processing the challenge. He flipped the sheet over and began writing, his pencil moving with swift precision. Equations, diagrams, and notations flowed across the paper, forming a mathematical landscape that Victoria could only partially navigate despite her considerable expertise. As he worked, Victoria discreetly pressed a button under her desk, activating a recording system. If this maintenance man was about to solve one of the most complex technical challenges facing her company, she wanted every detail captured. "And the fundamental error," Miguel said without looking up, "is in your approach to decoherence. You're trying to prevent it, but you should be harnessing it." "Explain," Victoria demanded, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine intellectual curiosity. In quantum computing, decoherence is typically viewed as the enemy, the collapse of quantum states into classical states. But markets themselves operate in a similar pattern. His pencil continued moving as he spoke. "Instead of fighting market unpredictability, your algorithm should embrace the collapse of possibilities into reality." He pushed the paper across to her, revealing an elegant reformulation of the core equation. "This allows the system to learn from decoherence events rather than being destabilized by them." Victoria studied the equation, her mind racing to keep up with the implications. It was brilliant, a complete paradigm shift that reframed their fundamental approach to the problem. "This would require rebuilding significant portions of the system architecture," she said, thinking aloud. "Yes, but the framework would be exponentially more stable and adaptable." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else. Your current approach has a critical vulnerability." Victoria's head snapped up. "What vulnerability?" "The way your system processes market data creates a predictable pattern. A sophisticated competitor could theoretically reverse engineer your predictions and manipulate markets accordingly." A chill ran down Victoria's spine. This was precisely what kept her awake at night. The fear that their revolutionary system might become a liability. The fact that a maintenance worker had identified this vulnerability within minutes was both terrifying and vindicated her impulsive decision to bring him into her confidence. "And your solution addresses this. It introduces controlled randomness at key processing junctures. The system remains predictable internally, but presents as chaotic to external analysis." Victoria studied Miguel with newfound intensity. "You're not just a maintenance worker, Mr. Castillo." A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, or resignation, crossed his face. "We all contain multitudes, Ms. Reeves. I fix your building systems by day and solve equations by night. Different work, same principles, identifying patterns, finding solutions." "Why maintenance?" she asked bluntly. "With your abilities, you could work anywhere. After my mother died, I had debts. Maintenance offered immediate employment, stable hours, and," he gestured around the office, "access to interesting problems. I never stopped learning. I audit MIT courses online. I read research papers during night shifts. And no one knows what you're capable of." He shrugged. "People see the uniform, not the person. It's convenient sometimes. Outside the office, the executives, Agitation was growing visibly. Victoria's assistant approached the door tentatively, only to be waved away with an impatient gesture. Victoria made a decision. She pressed the intercom on her desk. "And declare, cancel my meetings for the rest of the day, and have legal send up a standard NDA and consultant contract." "Yes, Ms. Reeves," came the immediate reply, tinged with confusion. Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Consultant? For now?" Victoria replied. "I need you to work with our development team to implement these changes. You'll be compensated appropriately, of course. And the stake in your company?" There was no greed in his question, merely clarification. Victoria leaned back, a small smile playing at her lip. "Mr. Castillo, what you've shown me is worth far more than money. You've potentially saved Apex from a catastrophic vulnerability while simultaneously solving our biggest technical challenge." She paused. "But I don't give away pieces of my company lightly. Consider this the first test of many." "So your original offer was what? A motivation technique?" "I never make offers I don't intend to honor," Victoria said firmly. "But great rewards require great proof. Show me you can implement this solution successfully, and we'll discuss your future at Apex, one that won't involve fixing thermostats." Miguel considered this, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. When do we start?" "Right now." Victoria stood and walked to the door. Opening it, she faced her startled executive team. "Everyone, meet Miguel Castillo, our new special consultant on the Quantum Meridian project. He'll be working directly with me, effective immediately." The shock on their faces was palpable, a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and in some cases, outright disdain. Victoria could almost hear their thoughts. "A janitor? Has she lost her mind?" "But Ms. Reeves," her CTO stammered, "we have protocols for bringing consultants onto sensitive projects. Security clearances, background checks, all of which will be handled." Victoria cut him off smoothly. "Mr. Castillo has just identified a critical flaw in our system that none of our highly paid experts caught. I expect him to receive your full cooperation." Her tone made it clear this was not a suggestion. As the executives dispersed in bewildered compliance, Victoria turned back to Miguel, who stood just inside her office, his maintenance cap still in his hands. "Ready to change your life, Mr. Castillo." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm more interested in solving the problem." Victoria smiled, genuinely this time. "That," she said, "is precisely why you're here." The next morning, Miguel stood in front of his bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing himself. The maintenance uniform that had defined him for the past 5 years hung neatly on the back of his door, replaced today by a charcoal suit Victoria had sent to his apartment late last night. It fit perfectly, an unsettling reminder of how thoroughly she had investigated him in the span of a few hours. He adjusted the tie, feeling like an imposter. The suit was armor for a battlefield he hadn't navigated in years. Since dropping out of MIT, Miguel had deliberately faded into the background, finding comfort in the anonymity his blue uniform provided. Now he was stepping back into the spotlight, armed with nothing but his mind and the opportunity that had materialized out of nowhere. His phone buzzed with a text message, "Car waiting downstairs. V. Urdi." Miguel lived in a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where black town cars with tinted windows didn't typically appear. He could imagine his neighbors' curious stares as he walked out. The driver opened the door without a word. Inside, Victoria sat reviewing documents on a tablet, dressed in a crimson suit that commanded attention. She looked up briefly as he entered. "The suit fits," she observed, returning to her tablet. "Yes, thank you." Miguel settled into the seat across from her, noting the luxury of the vehicle, subtle, expensive, and designed to project power. "Today will be challenging," Victoria said without preamble. "You'll be meeting with our development team. They're brilliant, territorial, and skeptical of outsiders, especially outsiders who were fixing their air conditioning yesterday and now have the CEO's ear today," Miguel added. A hint of a smile crossed Victoria's face. "Precisely. They'll test you, try to expose you as a fraud. Are you ready for that?" Miguel looked out the window at the city passing by. I've spent my life being underestimated, Ms. Reeves. It doesn't bother me anymore. Victoria studied him curiously. Most people would be intimidated. Most people haven't lost everything that matters and had to rebuild, he replied simply. After my mother died, I learned what true pressure feels like. This, he gestured to the car, the suit, the impending meeting, is just a different kind of problem solving. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. A momentary softening quickly masked. The Quantum Meridian team expects a Stanford PhD consultant I've headhunted, not their building's maintenance supervisor. I haven't corrected this assumption. Miguel raised an eyebrow. You want to see if I can pass as one of them? I want to see if they'll recognize brilliance regardless of its packaging. She handed him a security badge with his photo, taken from the building's employee database, and the title, Special Technical Consultant. Another test? He asked. I don't do charity, Mr. Castillo. If you're going to navigate my world, you need to prove you can handle every aspect of it, not just the mathematics. The car pulled into the underground parking garage of Apex Tower, stopping at a private elevator. Victoria exited first, Miguel following a step behind. They rode in silence to the 42nd floor, a restricted level that housed the company's most sensitive projects. The elevator opened directly into a state-of-the-art research facility. Glass-walled meeting rooms surrounded an open workspace filled with advanced computing equipment. Screens displayed cascading data, complex visualizations, and lines of code that would be unintelligible to most. To Miguel, it was a language he'd never stopped speaking. The development team was already assembled in the largest conference room, 8 people, all with impressive credentials and wary expressions. Victoria entered first, commanding the room's attention instantly. Good morning, she began, taking her place at the head of the table. As you know, the Quantum Meridian project has encountered significant obstacles. Yesterday, we had a breakthrough, she gestured to Miguel. This is Miguel Castillo, a special consultant who has identified a novel approach to our decoherence problem. The team's lead developer, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, looked Miguel over skeptically. Credentials. Before Victoria could intervene, Miguel stepped forward. Would you prefer my academic history or my solutions to your problem, Dr. Chen? Her eyes narrowed at his use of her name. Information he shouldn't have known. Both. Ideally, Miguel opened the leather portfolio Victoria had provided, extracting his notes from yesterday. He approached the digital whiteboard, activated it with a practiced gesture, and began transcribing his equation. The fundamental flaw in your current approach is here, he explained, highlighting a specific formula. Or you're treating market decoherence as noise to be eliminated, when it should be integrated as a core feature of the system. For the next 15 minutes, Miguel elaborated on his solution, moving through complex mathematical concepts with the ease of someone discussing the weather. He referenced obscure research papers, pointed out connections to emerging theories in quantum economics, and predicted the cascading effects of his proposed changes. The room's atmosphere transformed gradually from skepticism to stunned attention. Dr. Chen had moved to the edge of her seat, her eyes tracking Miguel's notations with growing excitement. This is, she began, then stopped, recalibrating. Your approach inverts our entire conceptual framework. Yes, Miguel acknowledged, because your framework was elegant but fundamentally misaligned with market realities. A younger team member spoke up. But these changes would require rebuilding half the system architecture, 42% by my estimation, Miguel corrected. And the alternative is a system vulnerable to manipulation and cascade failure. Victoria, who had been observing silently, interjected. The board has approved additional resources for this revision. I want a feasibility assessment by end of day. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, her eyes still on Miguel's equations. We'll need Mr. Castillo fully integrated into the team. His insights are crucial. The admission clearly cost her something in professional pride. That's the plan, Victoria confirmed. Mr. Castillo will have complete access to the Quantum Meridian systems, effective immediately. As the meeting continued, Miguel found himself drawn into technical discussions, whiteboard sessions, and rapid-fire debates about implementation strategies. The team's initial resistance melted as they recognized his genuine expertise. By midday, he was no longer an outsider but a valued collaborator, his maintenance uniform forgotten in the rush of intellectual exchange. During a brief lunch break, Victoria pulled Miguel aside into her private office adjacent to the research floor. "You've impressed them," she observed, pouring 2 glasses of water. "Dr. Chen doesn't respect many people. She's brilliant," Miguel replied. "Her work on quantum entanglement prediction models laid the groundwork for this entire field." Victoria handed him a glass. "You know her research? I've read all her published papers, some of them multiple times." He took a sip of water. "Your team is exceptional. They just took a wrong turn, conceptually. A wrong turn that could have cost us billions," Victoria reminded him. "Which brings me to our arrangement." She opened a drawer and removed a document. "This is an official employment contract, senior technical advisor position, with appropriate compensation and benefits." Miguel glanced at the salary figure and nearly choked on his water. It was more money than he'd ever imagined earning, more than enough to finally pay off his remaining medical debts and his mother's mortgage. "And equity?" he asked, remembering her original proposition. "That comes after proof of concept," Victoria replied. "Show me a working implementation and we'll discuss your stake in the company." Miguel considered the contract. "And what happens to my maintenance position?" Victoria looked genuinely surprised by the question. "You can't possibly want to keep it." "Those systems still need maintenance," he said simply, "and those people are my colleagues." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, respect, perhaps, or puzzlement at values so different from the corporate sharks she typically dealt with. "We'll arrange a proper transition," she assured him. "Your maintenance team won't be left short-handed." Miguel nodded, then signed the contract with a steady hand. His life had changed irrevocably in the span of 24 hours. "Welcome to Apex Innovations, Mr. Castillo," Victoria said formally, taking the signed document. "Now, let's see what you can really do." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of 18-hour days, intense collaboration, and breakthrough moments. Miguel became the cornerstone of the Quantum Meridian project, his theoretical approach transforming into practical implementation under his guidance. The team, initially resistant, now rallied around him, energized by the rapid progress and the elegant solutions he brought to each new challenge. Victoria observed from a careful distance, receiving daily updates but rarely interfering. She watched as Miguel navigated the complex social dynamics of her corporate world with surprising adaptability. He lacked the cutthroat ambition that defined most executives, but compensated with a quiet authority born from intellectual confidence. Tonight, she sat in her office reviewing the latest progress report, impressed despite herself. The timeline Miguel had established was aggressive, but they were hitting every milestone. The system redesign was proceeding twice as fast as her most optimistic projections. Her intercom buzzed. "Miss Reeves, Mr. Castillo is here as requested. Send him in." Miguel entered, looking more comfortable in his business attire than he had 3 weeks ago, though he still carried himself differently than her typical executives, less performative, more grounded. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, taking the seat across from her desk. Victoria closed the report. "The board meeting is tomorrow. They're expecting a demonstration of the revised Quantum Meridian system." "We're not ready for a full demonstration," Miguel replied. "The core algorithms are implemented, but we're still stabilizing the predictive outputs. I'm aware, but the board needs reassurance that their additional $100 million investment is yielding results." Miguel considered this. "We can demonstrate the proof of concept, show how the system now embraces market decoherence rather than fighting it. It won't be polished, but it will prove the fundamental approach is sound." "That will suffice," Victoria agreed. "You'll present alongside Dr. Chen." Miguel looked surprised. "You want me to present to the board?" "It's your solution, Mr. Castillo. Who better to explain it?" He hesitated. "These people, they're not like your development team. They don't care about the elegance of the mathematics. They want to know how it affects their bottom line." Victoria leaned forward. "Then tell them. Translate your brilliance into their language. Money, market share, Competitive advantage. That's the next test, Miguel. Can you make the leap from solving the technical problem to selling the solution? He met her gaze steadily. I can try. Don't try. Succeed. She handed him a flash drive. This contains the financial projections for Quantum Meridian's market impact. Incorporate them into your presentation. Make the board understand not just what you've done, but why it matters. Miguel took the drive, turning it over in his fingers thoughtfully. You're grooming me for something more than a technical role. It wasn't a question, but Victoria answered anyway. I'm determining your full value to Apex. As Miguel left her office, Victoria turned to the window, gazing out at the city lights. She'd recognized his brilliance immediately, but what continued to intrigue her was his adaptability. He moved between worlds with an ease that suggested deeper reserves than she'd initially suspected. Her phone rang, a private number she rarely shared. "Reeves," she answered crisply. "It's Harrison." The voice of her head of security was tense. "We've completed the deep background check on Castillo," Victoria tensed. "And there's something you need to see." The next morning, Miguel stood before the mirror in his apartment, adjusting his new tie, dark blue with a subtle pattern that complemented his tailored navy suit. He'd spent most of the night refining his presentation, translating complex mathematical concepts into business implications the board would understand. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. "Development team, all behind you. Don't let the sharks smell blood." Miguel smiled. He'd earned her respect, and that meant more than any board approval. He gathered his materials and headed out, surprised to find not the usual town car, but Victoria herself, waiting in a sleek silver Aston Martin. "Get in," she said through the open window. "We need to talk before the meeting." Miguel slid into the passenger seat, noting her unusually somber expression. "Problem with the presentation." Victoria pulled into traffic, driving with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. "Tell me about Nexus Dynamics." The name hit Miguel like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years. "What about it?" he asked carefully. "You founded it 8 years ago, a quantum computing startup that secured 20 million in venture capital before imploding spectacularly. You were investigated for fraud but never charged." Miguel looked out the window, watching the city blur past. "Your background check is thorough. Answer the question, Miguel." He turned to face her. "Yes, I founded Nexus Dynamics. We were developing quantum prediction models, primitive versions of what Apex is doing now. We had promising early results that attracted significant investment. And then reality intervened. Our algorithms worked in controlled environments, but failed catastrophically with real-world data. Exactly the problem Apex encountered. The investors panicked, pulled funding, and launched an investigation. Were you a fraud? Victoria's question was direct, her eyes briefly leaving the road to study his reaction. "No," Miguel said firmly. "I was overly optimistic and underexperienced. I believed so completely in our theoretical approach that I overlooked its practical limitations." He paused. "The same mistake your team made, but they had Apex's resources as a safety net. I had my mother's mortgage as collateral." Victoria was silent for a long moment, navigating through traffic with mechanical precision. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have given me the chance if you'd known? A failed entrepreneur who crashed and burned spectacularly, now working maintenance to pay off his debts." Miguel shook his head. "You would have seen only the failure, not the lessons learned from it. You don't know what I would have seen." Victoria replied sharply. "I know how this world works. One failure defines you forever, unless you have the connections or money to overcome it. I had neither." Victoria pulled into the private parking beneath Apex Tower, shutting off the engine but making no move to exit the car. "The board knows." Miguel felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. "Harrison told them. Harrison told me." The board chairman did his own digging. She turned to face him fully. "They want you removed from the project immediately." The unfairness of it burned. 3 weeks of revolutionary work, erased by a 5-year-old failure. "And you, what do you want?" Victoria's expression was unreadable. "I want what's best for Apex, always." "Then you should know something else about Nexus Dynamics," Miguel said, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "After it collapsed, I spent 2 years refining the algorithm on my own time, working through the flaws, developing the theoretical framework that I just implemented at Apex. You continued the research while working as a janitor. Victoria sounded skeptical. The maintenance room has excellent Wi-Fi, remember? And night shifts are long. Miguel held her gaze. The solution I gave you didn't come from a moment of inspiration in your office. It came from years of work, failure, and redemption that no one ever saw or valued. Victoria studied him with new intensity. You're saying quantum meridian salvation came from the ashes of your own failure. Poetic, isn't it? Miguel reached for the door handle. So what happens now? Do I clear out my desk or do I face the board? Victoria checked her watch. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. I'll handle the chairman. You focus on the presentation. She started the car again. Where are we going? Service entrance, she replied. We're making an unexpected change to today's agenda. The service entrance of Apex Tower was a world away from the gleaming lobby Miguel had grown accustomed to over the past weeks. Here, delivery trucks unloaded supplies, maintenance staff moved equipment, and the building's invisible workforce kept the corporate machine running smoothly. It was a place Victoria Reeves had likely never visited before today. Wait here, she instructed, parking the Aston Martin in a loading zone and ignoring the startled looks from workers who recognized her instantly. Miguel watched as she made a phone call, speaking in terse commands he couldn't quite hear. When she returned to the car, her expression had shifted from concern to calculated determination. Change of plans, she announced. We're going to your old workspace first. Miguel raised an eyebrow. The maintenance department? Why? Strategy was all she offered as she led him through service corridors he knew intimately. They arrived at the maintenance locker room, a utilitarian space with metal lockers, a small break table, and the faint smell of industrial cleaner. Your uniform, Victoria demanded. Where is it? Miguel hesitated, then moved to his old locker, which still contained his spare blue maintenance uniform. He removed it, holding the familiar fabric with a strange mixture of attachment and distance. Put it on, Victoria said. You want me to present to the board in my janitor's uniform? Miguel asked incredulously. I want you to remind them and yourself exactly who solved their $100 million problem. Victoria checked her watch. We have 12 minutes. Change quickly. As Miguel changed in the small staff bathroom, swapping his tailored suit for the worn blue uniform, Victoria made another call. When he emerged, she gave him an appraising look. Perfect, she said, though whether she meant his appearance or some aspect of her developing plan remained unclear. They took the service elevator to the executive floor, Victoria explaining her strategy in concise terms as they ascended. Miguel listened, his initial skepticism giving way to reluctant admiration for the audacious plan she was constructing on the fly. The boardroom of Apex Innovations occupied the entire northwest corner of the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. Inside, 14 men and women in expensive suits sat around a massive oval table, their murmured conversations falling silent as Victoria entered with Miguel, following a step behind. The chairman, William Hargrove, a silver-haired man with the sharp features of a predatory bird, was the first to react. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Miguel in his maintenance uniform. Victoria, what is the meaning of this? He demanded, rising slightly from his chair. Victoria smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Chairman Hargrove, members of the board, allow me to introduce Miguel Castillo, the man responsible for saving the Quantum Meridian project. We're well aware of Mr. Castillo's identity, Hargrove replied coldly, and his colorful history with Nexus Dynamics. What we don't understand is why he's wearing a janitor's uniform in our boardroom. Victoria moved to the head of the table with practiced authority, because that's who he was when he solved the problem that stumped our entire R&D department and 2 external consulting firms. She gestured for Miguel to take the seat beside her, a clear statement of her alignment with him. And today, he's going to demonstrate exactly why his past failure has become Apex's present salvation. The tension in the room was palpable. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, their earlier certainty about rejecting Miguel now complicated by Victoria's unexpected maneuver. Ms. Reeves, A woman midway down the table interjected, "We have serious concerns about entrusting our flagship project to someone with Mr. Castillo's track record." "As you should," Victoria replied smoothly. "Due diligence is the board's responsibility, but so is recognizing unprecedented opportunity." She nodded to Miguel, who stood and moved to the presentation screen at the front of the room. He felt the weight of their scrutiny, their judgment not just of his past failure, but of his very presence in their rarefied air. The blue uniform felt simultaneously like armor and target. "Distinguished board members," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "5 years ago, I failed spectacularly with Nexus Dynamics. Today, I'm going to show you why that failure was the necessary foundation for Apex's success." Miguel launched into his presentation, navigating seamlessly between complex technical concepts and their business implications. He explained how the core insight behind the quantum meridian redesign came directly from the ashes of his previous venture, how years of solitary research conducted during night shifts had led to the breakthrough Apex desperately needed. As he spoke, he could see the gradual shift in the board's demeanor. Their initial disdain gave way to grudging attention, then to genuine interest, as the financial projections demonstrated the market advantage his solution provided. "The revised system doesn't just fix the vulnerability," Miguel explained, displaying a series of comparative graphs. "It creates an entirely new competitive advantage. By embracing market decoherence rather than fighting it, we've developed a predictive model that becomes more accurate in volatile conditions, precisely when competitors' systems fail." Dr. Chen, who had joined the presentation midway through, added her technical validation. "Mr. Castillo's approach represents a paradigm shift in quantum-based market prediction. We've run simulations against historical market crashes, and our system not only survives the volatility, but thrives on it." A board member leaned forward. "And the implementation timeline, 6 weeks to full deployment," Miguel answered confidently. "We've already completed the core architecture revision. That's half the time your team initially projected," Hargrove observed, addressing Victoria directly. She inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Castillo works efficiently." The board's questions grew increasingly substantive, focusing on technical specifications and market implications rather than Miguel's background. By the time the presentation concluded, the atmosphere had transformed from hostile skepticism to cautious optimism. Hargrove cleared his throat. "Mr. Castillo, would you excuse us? The board needs to discuss this matter privately with Mrs. Reeves." Miguel nodded, gathering his materials with deliberate calm. As he walked toward the door, Victoria's voice stopped him. "One moment, Miguel," she turned to address the board. "Before we continue, I want to be absolutely clear about something. Mr. Castillo's contribution to Apex isn't just the solution to our technical problem. It's proof that brilliance doesn't always come in expected packages." She stood, commanding the room's attention. "This company was founded on the principle that innovation drives value. Today, we have a choice: embrace an unconventional solution from an unconventional source, or cling to our biases about who belongs in which role." Her gaze swept the table, challenging each board member individually. "If we reject Miguel Castillo because of his past failure or his recent position, we betray our own founding principle. And I will not lead a company that values pedigree over proven results." The ultimatum hung in the air, breathtaking in its audacity. Victoria Reeves, who had tripled Apex's value in 5 years, was effectively staking her leadership on Miguel's acceptance. Hargrove's expression was unreadable. "That's quite a declaration, Victoria. It's quite a moment, William." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Miguel stood frozen by the door, caught in the crossfire of corporate politics far above his previous pay grade. The person fighting for him now was not just a CEO protecting an asset. This was Victoria revealing her own vision for what Apex could be. "We'll discuss this in private," Hargrove said finally. "Mr. Castillo, thank you for your presentation." Miguel left the boardroom, the door closing firmly behind him. In the quiet of the executive hallway, he leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The last 3 weeks, the sleepless nights, the intensive work, the emotional whiplash of opportunity and potential rejection crashed over him in waves. Whatever happened next was out of his hands. The executive floor waiting area was designed to project power and wealth. Leather chairs that cost more than Miguel's monthly rent, abstract art with price tags in the six figures, and a panoramic view of the city that made humans seem small and insignificant. Miguel sat in one of those expensive chairs, still in his maintenance uniform, feeling the dissonance between his current reality and his surroundings. Dr. Chen found him there 30 minutes later, her typically stern expression softened with something approaching respect. "They're still deliberating," she reported, taking the seat across from him. "Hargrove and Victoria are having words." Miguel nodded, unsurprised. He doesn't like being cornered. Neither does she. Dr. Chen studied him with clinical precision. "You didn't mention Nexus dynamics when we were rebuilding the system. Would it have mattered?" "Yes," she said simply. "Context matters in science. Understanding that you'd already traveled this road once, even unsuccessfully, would have provided valuable perspective." Miguel considered this. "I was afraid it would diminish my contributions in your eyes. Failed entrepreneur turned janitor isn't exactly a credential that inspires confidence. Among small minds, perhaps." Dr. Chen's tone was dismissive, but any true scientist understands that failure is the foundation of discovery. Edison's 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb and all that. Edison had financial backing to keep trying, Miguel pointed out. "I had debt collectors and a dying mother." Dr. Chen nodded, acknowledging the reality behind his words. "Well, for what it's worth, the technical team is unanimously behind you. We've informed the board that losing you would significantly delay the project." "Thank you," Miguel said, genuinely touched by this show of solidarity. The boardroom door opened, and Victoria's assistant emerged, her professional mask firmly in place. "Mr. Castillo, the board requests your presence." Miguel stood, smoothing his uniform more from habit than any hope of looking presentable. Dr. Chen gave him a short nod, the closest thing to encouragement her reserved personality allowed, before he followed the assistant back into the arena. The boardroom felt different now. The tension had shifted, crystallizing around two opposing poles, Hargrove at one end of the table, Victoria at the other. The remaining board members sat in what appeared to be loose factions, their body language revealing alliances and reservations. "Mr. Castillo," Hargrove began without preamble, "the board has reviewed your contribution to the Quantum Meridian project and acknowledges its significant value to Apex innovations." Victoria's expression remained neutral, giving away nothing. However," Hargrove continued, "concerns remain about your past business failure and the unconventional nature of your transition from maintenance staff to senior technical advisor." Miguel waited, sensing the choreographed nature of this speech. After considerable discussion, Hargrove's gaze flicked briefly to Victoria. "We've reached a compromise. You will continue leading the Quantum Meridian implementation, reporting directly to Dr. Chen. Upon successful deployment, your position will be re-evaluated for potential permanent status." It was less than Victoria had promised, but more than Miguel had expected after the revelation of his past. He nodded his acceptance, not trusting himself to speak without revealing the complex mix of relief and disappointment swirling inside him. "There's one more thing," Hargrove added, his tone making it clear this was the part Victoria had extracted from him. "Mr. Reeves has advocated for an equity arrangement, conditional upon Quantum Meridian's successful market performance." Miguel's attention sharpened. This was unexpected. "If the system achieves the projected market advantages outlined in today's presentation, you will receive a 1% equity stake in Apex Innovations." A murmur rippled through the room. 1% might sound small, but in a company valued at billions, it represented life-changing wealth. "Do you find these terms acceptable, Mr. Castillo?" Hargrove asked, his tone suggesting the question was a mere formality. Miguel looked to Victoria, whose subtle nod confirmed this was the best outcome possible under the circumstances. "I do," he replied, "and I appreciate the board's willingness to look beyond my past." "Don't mistake this for sentimentality," Hargrove said coldly. "Ms. Reeves has convinced us that your value to Apex outweighs the risk you represent. Prove her right." With that brutal honesty, the meeting concluded. Board members filed out, some nodding to Miguel in acknowledgement, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Victoria remained seated, as did Hargrove, clearly waiting for a private conversation once the room cleared. Miguel moved to leave, but Victoria called after him. "Miguel, wait outside. We need to discuss next steps after this." He nodded and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Though he couldn't hear the words, the rhythm of the conversation that followed was clear enough. Hargrove's clipped accusations, Victoria's measured responses, a dance of corporate power where each step could mean millions gained or lost. Miguel removed his maintenance cap and ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. The last few hours had been an emotional roller coaster, and the weeks before that, a blur of relentless work. Yet for the first time in 5 years, he felt something like hope, not just for financial security, but for redemption. Victoria emerged from the boardroom 10 minutes later, her composed expression revealing nothing of the confrontation that had just occurred. "Walk with me," she instructed, leading him toward her private office. Once inside, with the door closed, she visibly relaxed, sinking into her chair with a sigh. "Well, that was considerably more dramatic than I prefer my board meetings to be. You didn't have to put your position on the line for me," Miguel said quietly. "I didn't do it for you," Victoria corrected him, her pragmatism reasserting itself. "I did it because Quantum Meridian needs you, and Apex needs Quantum Meridian. Business, not sentiment." Miguel didn't believe this was the entire truth, but he respected her need to frame it that way. A 1% equity is generous. It's less than you deserve, and more than Hargrove wanted to give. Victoria poured herself a glass of water from the carafe on her desk. The maintenance uniform was a calculated risk. It reminded them of who you were when you solved their problem, but it also reinforced their biases about your background. It was the right move. Miguel disagreed. It forced them to confront their assumptions directly, rather than pretending they were evaluating me solely on merit. Victoria studied him with newfound interest. "You understand corporate politics better than you let on." "I understand human nature," he corrected. "Corporate politics is just human nature with higher stakes and better clothing." A ghost of a smile crossed Victoria's face. "Speaking of which, you should change back into your suit. The development team is waiting for direction on next steps." Miguel glanced down at his uniform. "I thought I might keep wearing this for a while. A reminder to everyone, including myself, that value isn't determined by appearance." "Noble, but impractical," Victoria replied. "You've made your point. Now you need their respect, not their consciousness raising. In this world, the uniform matters, even when it shouldn't." She was right, of course. The symbolic statement had served its purpose. Now he needed to lead a team through the most critical phase of implementation, and that required a different kind of authority. "There's a change of clothes in my office bathroom," she added. "I had my assistant bring your suit down from the boardroom." As Miguel changed, he reflected on the whirlwind his life had become. 3 weeks ago, he was anonymously maintaining the building's systems, invisible to the power players whose decisions shaped industries. Now he was one of those decision makers, with a potential ownership stake in the very company where he'd once changed light bulbs and fixed leaky faucets. When he emerged, Victoria was on the phone, speaking in the clipped, precise language of high-level negotiation. She ended the call as he approached. "The announcement about your official role will go out company-wide this afternoon," she informed him. "Dr. Chen is assembling the team for a strategy session at 2. Miguel nodded. "And my maintenance responsibilities? Already reassigned, with a generous severance package for taking on the additional work." Victoria rose from her desk. "You need to let that part of your life go, Miguel. You can't simultaneously be the janitor and the technical visionary." "I can be myself," he countered. "That's what solved your problem in the first place. A perspective outside your carefully cultivated corporate ecosystem." Victoria studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to cut through pretense. "True, but beware of turning your background into a performance. Success changes everyone, Miguel, even you." It was a warning and a prediction wrapped in one. Miguel recognized the wisdom in it, even as he silently resolved to prove her wrong. The next 5 weeks weeks were a crucible of pressure, innovation, and countless 18-hour days. Miguel led the Quantum Meridian team with a unique blend of technical brilliance and practical problem-solving that earned him the respect of even the most skeptical engineers. His background as a maintenance worker, once a source of condescension from some team members, became an unexpected asset as he approached complex problems with solutions unburdened by conventional corporate thinking. Dr. Chen proved to be an invaluable ally, her meticulous attention to detail complementing Miguel's visionary approach. Together, they transformed the theoretical framework into a functioning system that exceeded even Victoria's ambitious specifications. On a rainy Thursday evening, while most of Apex Tower had emptied for the night, Miguel sat alone in the development lab, running the final diagnostic tests. The screens around him displayed cascading data, complex visualizations pulsing with life as the system processed millions of market variables in real time. He leaned back in his chair, watching the elegant dance of numbers and patterns with a sense of quiet satisfaction. After 5 years of obscurity and struggle, after the humiliation of Nexus Dynamics' collapse, and the lonely nights piecing together theoretical models while the world slept, his redemption was unfolding before his eyes. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Victoria stood in the doorway, her usual power suit replaced by more casual attire, though casual for Victoria Reeves still meant tailored slacks and a silk blouse that probably cost more than Miguel's monthly rent. "You're here late," she observed, entering the lab and taking in the data-filled screens. "Final calibration tests," Miguel explained. "The system goes live tomorrow." Victoria moved closer, studying the displays with practiced scrutiny. And it works." Miguel couldn't keep the pride from his voice. "Better than projected, actually. The decoherence integration is achieving 94% predictive accuracy in volatile market simulations." 94%. Victoria repeated, clearly impressed, despite her usual restraint. The board expected 70 at best. The board underestimated what was possible. Miguel gestured to a particular screen showing comparison metrics. "We're not just predicting market movements anymore. We're anticipating the cascade effects of those movements across interconnected sectors. It's quantum prediction in the truest sense." Victoria studied him thoughtfully. "You've changed, Miguel." He looked up, surprised by the personal observation. "And have I? 5 weeks ago, you were defensive about your past, uncertain of your place here." She gestured around the lab. "Now you speak with the confidence of someone who knows their worth." Miguel considered this. "I'm still the same person. I just have better clothes now." Victoria's laugh was unexpected, a genuine sound rarely heard in the executive suites of Apex Tower. "Your clothes have improved, certainly. But it's more than that." She took the chair beside him, an unusually informal gesture for her. "You've found your footing in a world that was designed to exclude people like you, people without Ivy League degrees and family connections," Miguel asked, a hint of his old bitterness surfacing. "People who question the fundamental assumptions of that world," Victoria corrected him. "The corporate ecosystem thrives on consensus and conformity dressed up as innovation. You bring actual innovation." Miguel was silent for a moment, processing her words. "Is that why you took a chance on me? Because I think differently?" Victoria's gaze shifted to the screens, watching the data flow with almost hypnotic intensity. "Partly, but also because I recognized something in you that day in my office." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Hunger, not just ambition, but a genuine hunger to solve the problem, to make something work that everyone else had failed to understand." "I was desperate," Miguel admitted. "My daughter's medical treatments." He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd never mentioned Maya to Victoria before. It was a part of his life he kept carefully separated from his work at Apex. Victoria's expression changed subtly. "You have a daughter?" Miguel nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with the personal turn of the conversation. "Maya, she's 8. She lives with my sister in Chicago most of the time." "Because of your work schedule," Victoria inferred. "And because of many things." Miguel turned back to the screens, recalibrating a parameter to avoid meeting Victoria's eyes. "She was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition 3 years ago." The treatments are experimental, expensive. My sister's a pediatric nurse. She can provide better care than I could while working 3 jobs to pay for the medical bills." Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its usual edge of command. "That's why you needed the money. Not just to pay off your mother's debts, but for your daughter's treatment." Miguel nodded, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "I should have told you from the beginning. It might have explained why I was so desperate to prove myself." "It wouldn't have changed my decision," Victoria said simply. "Your motives were irrelevant to your abilities." The statement was so quintessentially Victoria, pragmatic, unsentimental, that Miguel found himself smiling despite the heaviness of the moment. "What?" she asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing. It's just, you're exactly who you appear to be." "There's something refreshing about that." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "And as opposed to most people in positions of power who present one face publicly and operate with completely different motives privately." She considered this. "I built Apex by being direct about what I want and what I expect. It's efficient and lonely," Miguel observed. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, unused to having personal observations directed at her. "Effectiveness often is." The conversation had strayed into unexpected territory, creating an unfamiliar intimacy neither of them had anticipated. Miguel returned to the screens, running a final diagnostic sequence. "The system's ready," he said, redirecting to safer ground. "Tomorrow's demonstration for the board will exceed their expectations." Victoria accepted the change of subject with visible relief. "Good. Chairman Hargrove is bringing several major potential clients. If they're impressed, Quantum Meridian could secure contracts worth billions within the quarter." "And my equity stake," Miguel asked, "will be formalized the moment the system demonstrates the projected market advantage in real-world conditions." Victoria stood, resuming her more typical professional distance. "The legal documents are already prepared." Miguel nodded. 1% of Apex would transform his life and Maya's, providing security they'd never known. The thought of bringing his daughter home permanently, of being able to afford the best treatments without working himself to exhaustion, was almost overwhelming. "Get some rest, Miguel," Victoria advised, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow will be the most important day of your career at Apex." The way she emphasized "at Apex" caught his attention. "You think I'll leave once I have the equity?" Victoria paused, studying him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through pretense. "I think having options is new territory for you. Financial security changes priorities." "Speaking from experience?" he asked, pushing the boundary of their professional relationship. "My priorities have always been clear," she replied, neither confirming nor denying. "Get some sleep. The board meeting is at 10. After she left, Miguel ran one final system check, watching as Quantum Meridian processed complex market scenarios with unprecedented accuracy. The screens glowed in the darkened lab, illuminating his face with shifting patterns of blue light. Victoria's words echoed in his mind. "Having options is new territory for you." It was true. For 5 years, his choices had been constrained by debt, by his daughter's medical needs, by the weight of his past failure. Tomorrow, those constraints would begin to fall away. The question he hadn't yet confronted was what would remain of him when they did. He shut down the system and gathered his things, his mind already rehearsing tomorrow's presentation. As he passed through the empty corridors of Apex Tower, he nodded to the night maintenance staff, his former colleagues who now regarded him with a mixture of pride and distance. The janitor who had crossed over, who now inhabited a different world. In the parking garage, he paused beside his car, a modest sedan that now seemed incongruous with his position at Apex. Another thing that would soon change, he supposed. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Maya asked when you're coming to visit again. Her numbers are better this week." Miguel smiled, feeling the weight of tomorrow's presentation momentarily lifted by the reminder of what truly mattered. He texted back, "Soon. Tell her I love her. Things are about to get better for all of us." The morning of the demonstration dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of Apex Tower as Miguel arrived 2 hours early to run final system checks. The development team gradually filtered in, their nervous energy palpable as they prepared for what could be a career-defining presentation for all of them. Dr. Chen arrived at 8, her typically austere expression softened by the hint of anticipation. The board meeting is fully booked, she informed Miguel as they reviewed the demonstration protocol. 17 major potential clients confirmed attendance. Hargrove has turned this into a spectacle. Good, Miguel replied, his confidence unwavering after weeks of successful testing. There's more witnesses to what we've accomplished. The technical team moved with practiced precision, each member executing their assigned tasks with the coordination of a well-rehearsed orchestra. Miguel had transformed them from competitive individuals into a cohesive unit, breaking down the hierarchical barriers that had previously stifled true collaboration. At 9:30, Victoria arrived to review the final preparation. She moved through the lab with purposeful efficiency, asking pointed questions and absorbing the technical details with remarkable speed. The clients Hargrove invited represent over 40% of the potential market share for Quantum Meridian, she told Miguel quietly, as they stepped aside for a private word. This isn't just about impressing the board anymore. It's about launching Apex into a dominant market position. Miguel nodded, understanding the stakes. We're ready. Victoria studied him, noting the calm confidence he projected. Yes, you are. She glanced at her watch. The boardroom is prepared. We begin in 20 minutes. As she turned to leave, Miguel called after her. Victoria, she paused. Looking back, thank you for taking a chance on the maintenance guy. Something softened briefly in her expression. You've more than justified the risk, Miguel. With that, she was gone, returning to her role as the formidable CEO, preparing to showcase Apex's breakthrough technology. At precisely 10 o'clock, Miguel and Dr. Chen stood before a packed boardroom. Every seat was filled. Board members, senior executives, and representatives from financial institutions, investment firms, and technology companies around the world. At the head of the table sat Chairman Hargrove, his expression carefully neutral. Beside him, Victoria projected an aura of absolute confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, Miguel began, his voice steady, despite the pressure of so many influential eyes upon him. Today we present Quantum Meridian, not merely a predictive market analysis tool, but a fundamental reimagining of how financial systems interact with quantum probability. For the next 20 minutes, Miguel and Dr. Chen walked through the system's architecture, its revolutionary approach to market decoherence, and the unprecedented accuracy of its predictions. The technical brilliance was evident, but Miguel made sure to emphasize the practical implications for everyone present: the competitive advantage, the risk mitigation, the potential for market dominance. Theory is valuable, Miguel concluded, but results are what matter. So let's demonstrate Quantum Meridian's capabilities in real time. On the massive display behind him, the system initialized, connecting to live market data feeds from around the world. Complex visualizations materialized, showing the interconnected web of global financial systems pulsing with activity. We've programmed a simulated market disruption based on historical patterns, Miguel explained. The system will identify the disruption, predict its cascading effects across multiple sectors, and recommend optimized response strategies, all within seconds. Dr. Chen initiated the sequence. The room fell silent as they watched the virtual market scenario unfold. A significant disruption appeared in the Asian technology sector, a major manufacturer announcing unexpected production problem. Conventional analysis would predict a short-term impact on related stocks, but nothing systemic. Quantum Meridian saw deeper. Within moments, it traced the ripple effects through global supply chains, identified counterintuitive market responses, and predicted a cascade of secondary and tertiary effects across seemingly unrelated industries. Most impressively, it quantified the probability of each outcome with unprecedented precision. A 97% predictive accuracy, Dr. Chen announced, unable to keep the pride from her voice. 15 seconds from disruption to complete analysis. A murmur of impressed reactions spread through the room. Even Chairman Hargrove leaned forward with newfound interest. But prediction alone isn't enough, Miguel continued. Quantum Meridian also provides adaptive strategy optimization. The screen shifted to display multiple response scenarios, each with calculated outcomes and risk assessments. The system had identified opportunities invisible to conventional analysis, where others saw only risk. Quantum Meridian revealed hidden potential for growth. This is the future of financial intelligence, Miguel stated confidently. Not just seeing what will happen, but understanding the quantum nature of market possibility itself. As the demonstration concluded, the room erupted in questions. Technical inquiries from the engineers present, strategic questions from executives, and detailed implementation queries from potential clients. Miguel and Dr. Chen fielded them all with practiced expertise, the weeks of preparation evident in their seamless responses. Victoria observed from her position beside Hargrove, her expression revealing nothing of her internal satisfaction. The demonstration had exceeded even her expectations. Quantum Meridian wasn't just a successful project, it was a market revolution with Apex at its center. When the questions finally subsided, Hargrove stood to address the room. "Impressive work," he acknowledged, nodding to Miguel and Dr. Chen. "And if the system performs as demonstrated in real-world applications, Apex will indeed have changed the landscape of financial technology." It was as close to enthusiastic praise as the chairman ever offered, and the significance wasn't lost on anyone present. "We'll be scheduling individual consultations with interested clients beginning next week," Victoria added smoothly, taking control of the room. "Only priority will be given to early adopters with significant market presence." The message was clear: act quickly or risk being left behind while competitors gained access to Quantum Meridian's advantages. It was masterful business strategy, creating urgency among the assembled decision-makers. As the meeting concluded and attendees began networking in small groups, Victoria approached Miguel, who was engaged in technical discussion with representatives from a major investment firm. "A moment, Mr. Castillo," she interrupted politely. The executives nodded respectfully and moved away, giving them privacy. "The legal team is preparing the equity documents as we speak," Victoria informed him quietly. The demonstration exceeded all performance metrics specified in our agreement. Miguel felt a wave of emotion he hadn't anticipated, not just satisfaction at the professional triumph, but profound relief. The financial security that had eluded him for so long was finally within reach. Maya would have everything she needed. His years of sacrifice were about to pay off in ways he had barely dared to hope for. "Thank you," he managed, his voice uncharacteristically rough. Victoria studied him with that penetrating gaze. "This is just the beginning, Miguel. Quantum Meridian has potential applications far beyond financial markets. Healthcare systems, climate modeling, urban development, the architecture you've designed could revolutionize predictive modeling across multiple industries." Miguel hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead, too focused on the immediate goal of proving the system's viability. But Victoria, as always, was already 10 steps beyond, seeing possibilities where others saw only the present achievement. "We should discuss your role going forward," she continued. "The board will expect recommendations on Quantum Meridian's next phase of development." Before Miguel could respond, Chairman Hargrove approached, accompanied by representatives from 3 major financial institutions. Reeves, Castillo. He greeted them with unusual warmth. "These gentlemen are very interested in being first in line for Quantum Meridian implementation. Perhaps we could continue this discussion in my private conference room." Victoria nodded smoothly. "Of course, Chairman. Miguel, shall we?" As they walked toward the private conference room, Miguel caught sight of his reflection in the glass walls of the corridor, a man in an expensive suit, walking confidently alongside the CEO and chairman of one of the world's most powerful technology companies, about to negotiate deals worth billions. 6 weeks ago, he had been fixing the thermostats in these same executive suites, invisible to the power players who now treated him as a peer. The transformation was so complete, so sudden, that it felt almost unreal. Yet as he entered the conference room and took his seat at the table, he realized this was indeed his new reality. The equation question Victoria had challenged him with that first day in her office had been solved, and the solution had rewritten his life's trajectory. The negotiations began, and Miguel focused on the discussion at hand, pushing aside the emotional weight of the moment. There would be time later to process all that had changed. For now, there was work to do. His work, the work he had been born to do but had been denied for so long. Across the table, Victoria caught his eye briefly and gave him a small, private nod of acknowledgement. In that subtle gesture was everything unsaid between them: the recognition of his journey, the validation of her risk in choosing him, and the shared triumph of what they had accomplished together. 2 months after the successful demonstration of Quantum Meridian, Apex Tower hummed with a new energy. The company's stock had surged 43% following the announcement of contracts with 12 major financial institutions. Technology publications heralded the system as revolutionary, and competitors scrambled to develop their own versions, all several steps behind what Miguel and his team had created. Miguel sat in his new office on the 48th floor, reviewing implementation reports from the first wave of clients. The space was a far cry from the maintenance department's break room, where he'd once eaten lunch. Expansive windows offering panoramic views of the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than his old car, and a door with his name and title, Miguel Castillo, Chief Innovation Officer. The promotion had come as a surprise. After the demonstration's success, he'd expected to continue leading the Quantum Meridian team, perhaps with an expanded budget and more resources. Instead, Victoria had created an entirely new C-level position, placing him on equal footing with the company's other top executives and giving him broad authority to identify and develop new applications